Good morning. God bless you. Merry Christmas to you. This video is being sent out a couple of times. We're sending it out on Christmas Eve, so happy Christmas Eve to you. And we're also going to be sending it out just following Christmas. So hope you're having a great Christmas holiday, great Christmas weekend. And I hope this is a very refreshing, meaningful, and valuable time of the year for you. Last weekend, I started a series with you, just a 2-week series on some of the leadership lessons that come from the very first Christmas story. And last time that I was teaching, last time I was talking to you, I told you that from the first Christmas story, we learned that number one, some things cannot be delegated. Number two, some things must be pondered and not declared. Sometimes we just need to put things inside and meditate on them before we start blurting them out. The third thing was that religious people have the ability to create trouble for you. And the fourth thing that I taught to you last time was that difficulty does not mean that you're out of God's will. So today I want to give you 3 more leadership lessons from the first Christmas story. And today, number 5 is all through the Christmas story, the first Christmas story, is a great picture of a reality of our lives and our walk with God. There is a blending of the natural and the supernatural throughout the entirety of the story. There is a star to guide the wise men, supernatural. There's a pregnant virgin, it's supernatural. But there's also a journey to be had, and there are taxes to be paid. There is a census that's being taken, and there's a very, very natural birth that has to take place. And there are some needs that need to be met: shelter, a place to stay, an inn is sought, and there are some very natural things that are going to take place. All of these in one story. My friend, it's always that way. In our lives, there is always the natural and the supernatural. There's the spiritual and the practical, and they're always at work in our life. They are a constant in our life. And each of us comes equipped from the factory with a greater ability one way than the other. Some of us tend much more toward the spiritual. Others of us tend much more toward the practical. And whichever way you tend to lean, you have responsibility in the development of the other side. Every leader, every pastor, every missionary, every person that leads in a spiritual capacity has the demand upon them to be competent both spiritually and to be competent practically. It's like 2 wings on an airplane. Both of them are valuable. Both of them are essential. You can't do without either one of them and have successful flight. And the Christmas story reminds us and reminds us and reminds us that there are some supernatural things that are going to happen. There are going to be angels singing, and there are going to be angelic visitations. But boy, there are also just some practical things that need to take place. It's that way in your life. It's certainly that way in my life, that we need the natural to be done well, and we also need to expect God to show up supernaturally in our life. This next lesson that I want to share with you out of the first Christmas story, next leadership lesson, is that when God speaks to your heart, let him change people's minds. The angel spoke to Mary. She knew the game plan. She said, "How is this even possible?" But she knew the game plan. She had questions. She was absolutely called by God in a unique way. God's going to do some unique things with her. And Joseph had on his mind that he was going to put her away and divorce her quietly. But Mary allowed God to deal with Joseph. God came through in a dream. And when you lead and God speaks to you, and I pray that he does, boy, there is nothing we need more right now than godly leadership who is hearing from God about the direction and about the needs of the church and about what it is that we're supposed to be doing, when we're supposed to be doing it, how we're supposed to be doing it. I hope that God speaks to you. But when he does speak to you, when he comes to you, make sure that you leave room for God to convince those and to change the hearts of those who are in opposition to you. They're in opposition to what God has spoken to you and what God is doing in you. And it doesn't mean that they don't agree with God or that they don't love God. It's just that they haven't caught up to where you're at. Mary got in on the story first, and Joseph was 100% in. It just took him a little while to catch up. And God was faithful to change his mind about what he had put in Mary's heart. God will do the same thing for you, my friend. When God speaks supernaturally to you, give him some time to go ahead and change the minds of those who aren't tracking quite as quickly as you are. And the last lesson I want to bring to you from the first Christmas story, and then in God's economy, the least of these can become the hero of the story. One of my very favorite things about God is that he is not limited by having to use people that are already superstars. God is not limited. He can make superstars out of any level, any position, any rung of society, any story, any background, any set of issues, circumstance, problem, or disappointment. God can take people out of those situations and elevate them over and over and over again to a position of hero in the story. There are 5 characters in the Christmas story, and they're in descending order of importance in society, and they're listed that way in the Christmas story. At the peak of the societal structure is Caesar, Augustus Caesar, who was in that day the supreme powerful leader of the world. And then there's Quirinius. He's the governor of Syria, and he's a little farther down, yet he's still a man of prestige and power. And then next is listed Joseph. And he is a working man, and he's from Nazareth in Galilee. And after that comes Mary. And she's listed next because she's a female in a very male-dominated time of our world. She's farther down the scale in the values of that day. And at the very end, at the very lowest possible point on this list of players and significant people is Jesus. He's just an infant. He's the poorest of the poor, as far away from Caesar as anybody could possibly be. Yet in light of spiritual significance and light of significance in the kingdom of God, in light of the power of the Christmas story, the order becomes just exactly the opposite. When God puts his hand on it, those who don't matter become the heroes of the story. Jesus is the base of the other list and therefore becomes the most significant figure in the Christmas story. It's about him. It's about his birth. It's about his incarnation. It's about God putting on skin and being Emmanuel, God with us. Followed by Mary and Joseph, godly people used by God for his purposes. After that is the governor, and finally the man who has no significance in the Christmas story whatsoever, Caesar. The shepherds, they were out in a field. They held on very tightly to the lowest rung on the societal ladder. They were thought very little of. They were seen as liars and the con men of their day. As a matter of fact, their testimony would not even be allowed in a court of law. Yet God would choose them to proclaim the most wonderful message of all time. They said to one another, "Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened that the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off, and they found Mary, and they found Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds had said to them. God does it in this story. He does it every day. He can take anybody from any level and promote them to hero in whatever story God's working. God bless you, my friend. Merry Christmas. May this be a season of joy, peace, and refocusing on that baby in the manger, the most significant character of the story and of this time of year. God bless you.